So as tourism businesses have readapted, reviewed, and reinvented throughout the pandemic, what sort of trends are coming out of Ontario? So this panel asked tourism leaders to discuss what's been happening in their communities and what they predict reopening will look like. So moderating this panel is Kathleen Sharp from the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund. The panelists are Christopher Bloor from the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, Kevin Ashwick-Hogan from Indigenous Tourism Ontario, David Mclaughlin from Destination Northern Ontario, and Deborah Manzillo from Destination Ontario. And before I forget, we are just launching our first poll. So this is going to be available. There's a link in the chat. It's all via Mentimeter. So you can do that either on a separate screen. You can use your phone. There's a code that you can use. So you can have it open on your phone while you're listening. And it will be running for the duration of the panel. I'll give the results at the end of this panel. So you have about 40 minutes to fill it in. So on that note, I am going to pass it over to Kathleen to introduce your speakers or to start speaking to your speakers and get this panel started. So if everyone wants to turn on their cameras, we can get ready.
That's great. Thank you so much, Megan, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathleen Sharp, and I'm thrilled to be with you representing the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, which is a program with cultural tourism at its core, and to have the opportunity to moderate this great group of speakers. I think we have a unique opportunity to get it right on the cultural tourism front. Our ministry has realized the importance of culture and tourism working together and has combined the two areas under one assistant deputy minister, something we have wanted to see for some time. This has started to result in some new and important partnerships, which will serve the area well. Thank you to Minister McLeod and the ministry staff for their leadership on this. It's been a very long 15 months, and as we prepare to use everything we've learned and developed over that time to assist with reopening, it's a perfect time to come together to share what we've discovered. A big thank you to the Ontario Culture Days for seizing the moment to discuss the importance of cultural tourism to Ontario and how we can do it better as we move into an unfolding reopening throughout the summer and fall, something completely new to all of us. We only have 40 minutes. Our panelists will speak for around 5 minutes each, and I may then mix it up with a question or two, and we'll turn to Megan on the controls for your questions. Hopefully there will be time for all of it. Now let's get started with Deborah Manzillo from Destination Ontario. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Kathleen, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm with Destination Ontario. I'm Vice President of Industry Relations and International Marketing, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of who we are. We're part of the Ministry of Heritage, Sport and Tourism, Culture Industries. We see our vision as to position Ontario as a preferred global destination. The mission is to generate increased visitation by Ontarians, because Ontarians make up approximately 80% of our visitation here in Ontario, Canadians and the international travelers. We want to enhance the expenditures in Ontario and contribute to provincial economic prosperity. We're going to do this through impactful marketing and results-oriented investment partnerships. We partner with RTOs, DMOs, industry partners, and people like yourself. The markets that we currently market in, and as I said, COVID is the backdrop of this, but we still kept the lights on with top of mind. Domestically, we're within Ontario. We market to Quebec, and we also market to the rest of Canada. In the USA, we look at the borders, we look at the drive markets and some of our fly markets. And internationally, we're in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, China, Japan, South Korea, and Mexico. And we work with Destination Canada in these destinations. When we go in as Team Canada. It's more effective, and we leverage a lot of their knowledge and trends. So when we go into market, we deliver our marketing through a series of different tactics. One is television, radio, digital, social, print, and also we have our Ontario travel centers, which provide a great customer service to the industry and also to the public. But today we're here to talk about how does culture fit in? How does it move past the restart and into moving along? We know that culture industry is one definitely creates, they entertain, they excite, they engage, it resonates and inspires the province nationally and internationally. We've been going through COVID-19 and Ontario's cultural community provided quickly and effectively pivot. You guys were the lifeline for us. When we were holed up in our homes, we turned on our computers, we watched our TV, and it was the cultural world that kept us hanging on. Provided music, arts. It was an immersive sort of feeling, and it gave us a hope, and it gave us light to continue on. So what we're looking to do with Destination Ontario, I'm going to try and speed up because I don't want to take up much of our time, but our objective is to domestically, the campaign will be hyper-local. We'll look to regional domestic travel. We'll align with the government's restart framework. We're going to try to promote Ontario as a destination of experience. Like our last speaker spoke, we're looking to align the experiences and the products. What we did effectively, we felt during this time period, was socially. Much of the social activity over the past few months, we profiled cultural things to do in Ontario while staying at home. It included Ontario travel blogs that feature art and cultures and crafts. We did social link engagements. We highlighted Ontario's cultural days with ways to rediscover the arts and culture. We also posted 15 ways to experience Ontario culture from home and take part in the hashtag Ontario Spirit, which was highly effective. We also encourage people to join in on Ontario's live stream events from home with our list of ways to experience Toronto and Ontario cultures without leaving your house. It was really, really important. We amplified ways to stay inspired and connected to Ontario's arts and cultural community through website development. We developed Ontario Live events, which was very well received. And I guess kind of to wrap it up, what we need from you is you have the assets, you have the knowledge. Destination Ontario, we have the reach. And if we work together, we can form a path to move forward. We want to be able to share your stories. We want to be able to share a success. And I think that will be our path forward. I'm going to quickly wrap it up. Our teams are here. We have digital content that we're looking for, we're hungry for. We have social media, creative services, earned media, business development, visitor services, data insights, industry relations, and northern partnerships. With all of this, we can help you. So please, as the Jerry Maguire movie, help me help you. So thank you. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Deborah. There's a great offer to everyone there. And here's Dave Mclaughlin from Destination Northern Ontario to give you his view.
And thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. I am coming via satellite from a remote location. I'm at a remote lake in Northern Ontario, so hopefully a float plane doesn't fly over and disturb the signal, but we'll give it a whirl here. I just want to say, following up from Deborah, I've known Deborah for many years and all the fine folks at Destination Ontario, and really do encourage people to work out the intelligence that they have and the assistance that they can provide. To us as an RTO has been invaluable over the years in terms of breaking into markets or, helping with creative sharing of digital assets. They're just fantastic partners. So you can't say anything more about Destination Ontario. Just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're seeing here in the north and where we've been and where we're going. Obviously, nobody was prepared for this pandemic. And I think, even last year we thought, well, we'll all be closed for a couple months and we'll get back at it. And here we are a year and a half later. Last year, once things got going, most people in the north had a very busy season. We did have some challenge sectors, certainly the RBT sector, that's our wilderness lodges, our fishing lodges, very challenged. Our hotels did better on the occupancy side. We actually led the country in occupancy. The town of Kenora had 94% occupancy last summer. But certainly, because of, the food and beverage banquets and meetings and convention sports not taking place, challenges there. And then, the culture and heritage sector, obviously challenges there in terms of anything that required, numbers of people to visit or take part of in a festival and event. We're expecting to see the same for this year once things get going. Highways are already starting to pick up speed. Anyone that's on Manitoulin Island right now will tell you that they're hopping. I can tell you with 2 new hotels open in Wawa, you cannot get a room there this weekend. So things are starting to pick up. And we expect that will continue over the course of the summer. There's a lot of interest in people getting out and visiting all parts of Ontario right now. we did a survey on our website and had over 17,000 responses. And just a couple of nuggets of information that I thought was really interesting. People were willing to travel further. People were willing to travel multi-days to get to a destination. People are looking to stay longer, 7 days, 2 weeks, even 3 weeks holidays. So they are, challenging for the urban markets. Only 6% of people were actually looking for urban type of holiday. Everyone's looking to get out and experience the great outdoors. Our operators right now are having challenges in terms of labor gaps. So we cannot fill the jobs that we have. We're starting to hear that now, so we are. A lot of confusion still out in the marketplace with lodges and business owners, what they can and can't do. But I think everyone's very hopeful that things are going to turn around and we're going to have a very good summer. I know again, last year, there are operators who will tell you they had the best year that they ever had. And we're hoping to have more of those success stories this year. So the real challenge for us is working with great partners like Destination Ontario, Kevin's group and Indigenous Tourism Ontario, or DMO partners, everybody, cultural institutions, to get people dispersed. There's a real opportunity this year, to get people off the main highways, to get them to some of the smaller destinations, and perhaps, get them to see some of the smaller museums, et cetera, that perhaps they may not have looked at a couple of years ago. But we need to avoid overcrowding. And so I know Destination Ontario has already started the work, as have we, in terms of preparing these itineraries to actually disperse people and give people and send people to get off the beaten path. And the previous speaker, I thought that was interesting. He was talking about transportation networks, and we still have a lot of broken transportation links in the province. Hopefully, as things open up, that will come back. But I think the overall trend is, the numbers are looking good right now in terms of infections, vaccines. We're doing very well. The U.S. is doing very well. Let's just hope that continues, and that we all can have a very good summer, and that we've turned the corner, and that the news will get better and better every day. And that's it for me.
Great. Well, great, Dave. Thank you so much. It's great that certain parts of the industry are doing really well. That's very encouraging. And I'd like to turn it over to Kevin from Indigenous Tourism Ontario.
Ani bojo gigadon ene dijnikas dodona sing donjba gnoje dodem. To David's point, I'm in a remote area as well in some regards on the Ondakamnakanic First Nation. And before I get into things, Kathleen, I want to acknowledge that coming from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, and want to acknowledge all the residential school survivors and all of those who passed at residential schools. Of course, all of the discoveries that are happening across the country. We appreciate all the kind words and the empathy that's being shown by other Canadians. It's very much appreciated. But I will say this, I've had this conversation with my family many generations. For Indigenous people, and I'm not saying that I'm desensitized to the issue, but we need to make sure that we know that Indigenous people have been saying these things for decades. And we've been, in these situations for a long, long time. And some of us have become a little desensitized to the discoveries because this is something we've been declaring for quite some time. So with that, I'll move on. I don't want to take up too much time on I know we've got a set amount of time here, but I want to talk about Indigenous tourism on a collective. And to David's point, really quickly, David, Manitoulin is busy. That's where I am. And my delay today is probably a good one. It was getting stuck behind a tractor that's carrying some hay. So there's some haying going on. It means the grass is growing and there's been some rain. So that's a good thing. With that being said, there's a lot going on in the Indigenous tourism right across the province. And it's very exciting times on that front as we start to come out of the global pandemic. David shared some very positive news that activity is happening. And same thing on our front with Indigenous tourism. Pre-pandemic, one of the highest experiences in demand with international visitors was Indigenous tourism experiences, not just with international visitors, but also with Canadians. So we're excited to pick up where we left off, and we're going to see some fantastic growth here. And one thing I want to point out to everybody who's listening in here is, Indigenous tourism is not just about Indigenous people. It's for all of us, and it's a big part of our country's history, and we need to share it together and presented together in respectful manners. And everything that we do should be done in a mutually beneficial manner, in a very respectful manner. Very privileged and humbled to be sitting on a panel with everyone on this call. Worked with David for years, Deborah, Chris, fantastic people, and they understand that and how we work together. And it's not exactly the same in presenting culture from an Indigenous perspective. It needs to be done respectfully. It needs to be done with Indigenous people telling their story on their terms. And, I don't think appropriation is as common as it used to be even just 10, 15 years ago, but we need to be mindful that we're including the right people at the right time and hearing their story appropriately. Kathleen, I'd like to share a little bit about some of the things that we've done, and I know I've got a couple of minutes here. One of the things we did during the pandemic, as we are meeting here today, we simply enough embraced technology, and we're continuing to do so. And there's some great initiatives that we've taken on. We've got about a dozen projects on the go to help support the Indigenous tourism industry, get more involved in the larger Ontario tourism economy, and it's starting to pay dividends already. We sold our first virtual reality experiences 2 weeks ago, and it's very, very gratifying to say that, that whole model was created to generate new revenue for Indigenous tourism operators, but it's one that can be replicated and scaled up. And we're glad to say that, and the way we modeled it, 60% of those revenues go back to the Indigenous tourism operator. And that's just a completely new revenue stream for them that's helping them, get renewed coming out of the pandemic, but for the most part right now be preserved during this phase that's still critical for all of us. Another really fantastic one that is still in the works is our augmented reality application, and it's province-wide, very educational, interactive, and experiential. And it's going to help educated visitors, domestic and international, when they're entering into traditional territories, into treaty territories, when they're entering into a First Nation. When I was previously as a guide, one of the most common questions I received as a guide was, are we on the First Nation yet? And we were almost all the way through a First Nation in most cases. So a lot of people don't even know when they're on a First Nation or if they're even allowed to go into a First Nation. And these are some pretty simple things to understand. So we're going to help educate on that front. And we're going to showcase and bring to life some of our historic monuments across the province. We're in talks about bringing, certain statues to life in certain regards, bringing murals to life in a 3D fashion. And all people need is something they've already gotten in their back pocket usually, which is their smartphone. So we're embracing technology, and there's lots of opportunity for Indigenous operators. But I look at this group on this panel, they're Indigenous or they're tourism colleagues, but more importantly, they're our tourism family. And when we look at the tourism industry, it's the tourism family that comes first and foremost, and everybody benefits. And that old cliche of the rising tides raise all boats is very applicable. And we're going to come out of this stronger than ever, is our opinion from the Indigenous tourism perspective. Mclaughlin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I'm sure we're going to circle back to some of the things that you talked about, some great ideas for new directions. So next up, or our final speaker is Chris Bloor, who is sort of new now. I mean, he isn't completely new, but he's sort of new, taking over from TIAO's, the reins at TIAO. And I'd love to hear what your experiences have been, Chris.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this symposium over the next couple of days. It's really appreciated, and it's great to share the panel with some familiar faces who are doing incredible work in tourism and are often at the forefront of the changes and the progression that we need as an industry going forward. So thank you again for this opportunity. And, listen, at TIAO, we are obviously in a position at the moment where we are trying to create the environment for our recovery to be successful. That's, trying to ensure that tourism businesses have the right economic supports they need, that the right regulation is in place, but also during the reopening period that it is at a sustainable pace that businesses can viably reopen at. And so that is a lot of the day-to-day work that we're doing right now, working with government and working with our stakeholders to create that environment for our industry to rebound as quickly as possible. And we know that that includes not just reopening as a province, but also reopening our international borders, which is so important for us to be able to rebound successfully. And so I'm just going to sort of touch on some of the history of the last 16 months that we've had and the work that TIAO has done to try and improve the situation, completely in partnership and collaboration with many of the people, not just on this panel, but also on this call over the last year and a half or so, but also just talk about why cultural tourism is just so important as we move forward and we try and create more authentic experiences. But also, you know, we're entering a hugely competitive time in the tourism industry. Some countries are slightly ahead of us because of their reopening frameworks have moved quicker than ours, or they've got higher vaccination rates. There is going to be a very competitive market out there, and so authentic experiences and cultural experiences are going to be crucial for us as a provincial tourism industry, but also as a national industry moving forward. So, you know, prior to the pandemic, our industry was growing at an exponential rate. You know, in the province, we were responsible for $36 billion of economic activity, a huge employer of close to 500,000 people, and responsible for the maintenance and sustaining of over 200,000 businesses. And, you know, it's fair to say that the last 16 months have been pretty horrific and catastrophic for us as an industry. You know, we were the canary in the coal mine at the start of 2020 as COVID-19 spread across the globe. You know, we started to have early cancellations, and that sped up quickly to domestic cancellations and tour groups cancelling as the emergency was declared in Ontario. So we've definitely been the first to be hit, the hardest to be hit, and we are likely to be the last to recover. And Destination Canada have put out some really interesting data that shows, you know, this could be a 4 or 5 year period for us to rebound to what we were pre-COVID. But you know, the innovation and resilience that has been shown by our industry in every corner of our province has really, as David and Kevin and Deborah have alluded to, just really shown how important we are as an industry. You know, we are a huge economic part of our economy. You know, you can't have an economic recovery in Ontario or Canada as a whole without the tourism and hospitality industry rebounding, and not just in jobs or economic activity, but we're such an integral part of the ecosystem of our economy in downtown economies, but also in rural and regional economies. Tourism, you know, just creates events, cultural sites create buzz and bring people into towns and cities. And so it's so important that we have cultural tourism at the heart of what we do going forward. And, you know, as much as our members have innovated, you can't replace in-person experiences. You know, you can't taste and smell some of the incredible offers that we have in our province in front of a Zoom call. And so just to quickly go through some of the sort of statistics that sort of symbolize what's happened over the last 16 months. Revenues for our members go from a 71% reduction for the majority of our members on average, up to 90% for over a third of our businesses. That's down to border closures, restrictions and closures. You know, we're seeing that most businesses, despite support programs like SUS, have lost on average over 10 members of staff. And most concerningly, as we sort of enter the recovery period, the vast majority of our businesses have taken on 6-figure debt sums to try and get through this period. And as we slowly start to reopen and we start to be able to increase the capacity limits and be able to do more as a province, we now face what David mentioned earlier, a real labour shortage problem that was prevalent before COVID-19, but has been completely exacerbated by the COVID situation as more workers have left the workforce, gone into different industries because of the precarious nature of our industry during COVID. And so these are some real big challenges that we continue to face on a day-to-day level, but also in the future. And TIAO has been trying to ensure that we have a reopening period that is as quick as possible, also as safe and based in science as possible. And we're also fighting the battle on the national stage to ensure that we get those borders open as quickly as we can, because we know however much that we travel local and support local, we need international tourists to supplement our industry. And TIAO has been really focusing on the solvency of our businesses, whilst many of you have not been able to take in paying guests and attract people. And so we've worked to get the Travel and Tourism Small Business Grant, the Ontario Small Business Support Grant. We have the Ontario Tourism Community Recovery Program that's being rolled out in the coming weeks. And we have the travel tax credit, which we hope will be rolled out during this summer to incentivize people traveling within Ontario. But, just to touch quickly before I hand it back, Kathleen, on cultural tourism. And this is something that, a trend that I think is really exciting and is something that is going to be a real part of our tourism offer moving forward, is that, people want more personally relevant and less packaged or mass produced tourism experiences. People, whether it's because of social media, whether it's because of a rejection of mass, of fabricated experiences, or they want to buy local, they want mass customization, they want to shop small. And that's what people are looking for moving forward. And not just in our cultural and heritage sites, but in our small towns. People are looking for things that are off the beaten track. And so this is really exciting for us, tying into what we were talking earlier in the previous panel about regenerative tourism. How can we add to the community rather than potentially damaging the community? And so, I'm also thinking of people on the call right now. I'm thinking of Leslie Harper. I think Leslie was on the call, and the historical educational tours that she does in Niagara. This is what people are looking for right now. People are looking to I remember the famous New Zealand tourism advert that was out last year, where it was like, don't go to the Instagram sites, don't go to the places where everyone queues up to have the same picture. Do something different, do something unique to the experience. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. The economic impact of Ontario's arts and culture tourism is substantial. We know it's 3 to 4 billion in GDP, and we know that it creates up to 100,000 jobs. So this is going to be a key part of our offer moving forward. We know that people who come for cultural experiences stay longer and spend more. So it's really integral that this is a huge part of our offer going forward. And I'm excited to hear some of the questions and some of the answers from our panelists. But so I'll pass back, Kathleen, at that point.
Okay, that's great, Chris, and thank you so much, because we all know that the cultural tourist spends almost twice as much as other types of tourists. So obviously they're desirable. Sometimes they're harder to find, but they're clearly very, very important to both of our sectors. So now we have about 10 minutes, and I have a couple of questions that I'm sort of weaving together that I'd love to hear your responses to, and then we'll turn it over to Megan, who hopefully will be able to at least pose one of the questions from the Q&A. So I'd just like to start out the discussion by asking all of you to highlight the single most important trend that has emerged during the pandemic. What will we all be conscious of, not just now, but in 18 months to 3 years? And what tools did you discover you needed and you didn't have? So anyone can jump in. Maybe we'll go in the same order. Deborah, do you want to jump in?
I think I'm going to start with trends, and I'll probably have to ask you to repeat the other ones because I was quickly trying to think. I think what we're seeing in trends is the fact that we've been able to live without. When we now start coming on board, that dollar that we're going to spend, we're going to really think about how we're going to spend it. So the product or the experience has to speak to that audience. We have to make sure there's going to be value. We're going to have to make sure it means something to them. So I think that's one of the things you're going to see for sure.
Yeah, I would just come in and say, listen, one of the real note, David referred to the fact that in Northern Ontario, they had some businesses that had great summers in terms of business. And we did find that people were leaving downtown areas like Toronto out for an hour outside also the city limits, and were finding new experiences in very small towns and villages. And so some of those towns and municipalities really struggled to be able to cope with that over tourism that they had during that summer. And I think that is a trend that will potentially continue, as many of our seasoned attractions and medium-sized attractions will still be restricted in terms of the number of people they'll be allowed into those facilities or those parks or provincial parks. So there is still that potential for some areas to be completely flooded with potential domestic tourists, and those pose some real difficult questions for how does those municipalities react to that. How do we educate tourists to be responsible when they visit those new areas, but also how do we build the infrastructure to support these new tourism spots that could find that during this pandemic they've been identified as an area that tourists want to visit, and how do we make sure that those areas can build upon that progress and success and also make it beneficial to the town as a whole. So that's something that I don't think we were very well prepared for, because we weren't sure of how far people would travel or whether they would be willing to travel. And I think that's something that we're working forward at TIAO now about responsible tourism moving forward.
Really, really great point. I'm just thinking maybe Kevin and Dave, if you want to jump in and just talk about what tools you discovered you needed and didn't have, might be good, because I want to make sure we get to at least one question from the participants.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll let Dave finish off the conversation. You'll get the final words. So one, when looking at the tools that we've discovered we had is, I don't want to say we've discovered them, because we've always kind of had them, at least from an Indigenous tourism perspective or Indigenous perspective, is that ability to be innovative. And we've got those tools within us. And I'll just speaking from an Indigenous perspective, we were innovative 500 years ago. We talk about the canoe that I don't want to go down the long list, but now that we're embracing technology and looking at how to best tell the Indigenous tourism story on our terms, being innovative is at the forefront of them. That's those tools that we need. And when we're looking at, how we're going to do that and trends and that sort, Kathleen, those smaller, intimate experiences that embrace being respectful of the environment really align with Indigenous experiences, who at the heart are cultural experiences. So, when we talk about culture, I think that's at our core in all of us. And, I think we're going to see that there's always going to be mass tourism in the global tourism model, and we need international visitors, but you're going to see a more mindful traveler, as Chris alluded to, with regenerative tourism. And that's going to be around for a little while, I think, beyond just opening up here for next summer or even this summer. Mclaughlin.
Yeah, and I just echo what Kevin said. I think that one of the biggest things that we've seen is the resilience of the sector, and the ability of everyone to come together as never before to solve problems and get people going. I know, from a tool standpoint, we have a website that was really targeted, here in the north, because we're so much closer to the U.S. markets than the Southern Ontario markets for most of our region. We retooled that to go, to talk to a domestic market, and we really didn't know where that was going to take us. And actually, our visits went through the roof. So that was a really cool thing for us. And I think the only tool I'm still looking for is a bigger eraser, because every time we think we got it and we got a plan, we're ready to launch. It's time to erase and start all over again. So it is, but it's been quite the challenge. And I think we've all, the fact that we're all here and still working through it, and now starting to turn our attention to recovery just says so much about the stamina of all of us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When you were saying that you were looking for a bigger eraser, I thought you were going to say bigger check. But anyway, why don't I turn it over to Megan now, and she will look at questions in the Q&A, and we'll see how far we get in the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. That was great. It was too short. We have a bunch of great questions. I've actually been struggling to pick the one that I want to ask. But Marley is asking about organizations such as the ones we have here. She was specifically saying places like Destination Ontario and TIAO, but I think this is relevant to all panelists. What are ways that you can be supporting the reopening of things like theater, music, live dance venues, such as like clear guidelines, what needs to be done, how to be attracting those out of town visitors? And I think sort of the flip side of that too is how can people in those arts organizations be reaching out to you and letting you know what they're doing for reopening and how you can best connect to get these audiences as we start to get going again.
I can start just come, contact us. Hopefully we'll be able to give our, I guess, our details later, but connect to us, because as I said, we don't know what we don't know. We're willing to amplify what you have. And I think it's important to let us know what are your pain points, and we'll see how we can work together to solve them. Because I don't know what are all the struggles that you would have within the theater. And so if we know those, we can utilize some sort of plan of how we can help and make it work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, listen, we do a lot of work with, we represent such a wide variety of different people within our sector, and we're doing a lot of work right now with commercial theatre groups, music and art groups and festivals. And I know that one of the big frustrations for the industry moving forward is the lack of clarity on some of the principles and guidelines to reopen. And we've been working throughout this period to make sure that there's a level playing field between different sectors and different parts of our industry, and also just highlighting when we think there are mistakes in the reopening plans and when we think the principles have not been fairly applied. And this, we on a daily basis are in contact with the health table, with the chief medical officer, with the Ministry of Heritage, Tourism and Sport and Culture Industries, on a daily basis, explaining where we think things could be clearer and where things can be done quicker. And on many occasions, we have helped facilitate and put together reopening plans that we put to government for their consideration so that they can help support those industries. And that's something that is going to be happening throughout this period, as hopefully we enter stage 2 quickly and stage 3, and what happens post stage 3, because this is, we're hopeful that we never will have to return to the emergency brake, but we have to be ready as an industry to do that. And so if you have any specific concerns or queries about the reopening plan, I've just put my email in the chat box, and feel free to contact me. But we are doing a lot of work with the sectors that you've just mentioned to get them open as quickly as possible, because government are often saying to me, Chris, we can't spend any more money, we can't continue these economic supports that you want to the end of the year. Well, the best way to do that, and the best way to ensure that we don't need them, is to be able to allow us to reopen, or to do limited indoor or outdoor classes, or allow live streaming. And so those are conversations that are happening every day, and we just have to make sure that we get a balance between what keeps businesses viable, but that follows the science and is acceptable for government. So that is a daily conversation that I'm having, and please do send me any emails of any queries that you have.
And I'd just follow up by saying just one thing, in terms of awareness, and as you reopen, certainly Deborah's point, like, get in touch with your RTOs, get in touch with your DMOs, Destination Ontario, but also consider your local visitor information center, and get the information out there so that we can work to disperse people across the province this summer. We just need the information.
Actually, before we end, because I think we're right at time, David, could you define DMO and RTO for those who might not be used to the acronyms?
Okay.
Or anyone? So, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, this could take a day and a half. So I referred to RTO. So, through the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, and I can rhyme that off so fast because I remember it as HST Criminal Investigation. They created 13 tourism regions across the province just a little over 10 years ago. So your regional tourism organization in your area should be functioning and facilitating those partnerships and connections, and certainly a destination marketing organization. So whether it's attached to a municipality, an urban, or in some cases regional, in some cases sector organization, where it has some form of affinity in the type of tourism that's being offered. Certainly all these organizations can help get the message out. We all work well together.